On this Wednesday, the first federal debate in Montreal. Four leaders face off in French.
Obviously, they're going to attack.
Why one party was disinvited. Canada's economic uncertainty, how the trade war has affected consumer spending.
Banks right now are pretty desperate for business.
And where interest rates are likely headed. Feeling ignored.
Look at the people who are falling through the cracks.
The calls for political parties to put a stronger focus on eliminating poverty. And an exciting chapter in history kicks off.
It's about more than sport.
The first matchup of Canada's only professional women's soccer league.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The first of two leaders' debates in the federal election campaign has just wrapped up. This one was in French. It is the first time Canadians saw the party leaders face off. The Green Party was not part of it. This morning, the Greens were told by the debate commission they were no longer invited because they didn't meet the criteria. The party calls that undemocratic. The commission says the Green Party originally met the criteria, then dropped 15 candidates and fell below the threshold needed. Mackenzie Gray is covering the French debate for us tonight.
Si, un message important. Go, Abs, go!
A cheer for the local team, whose final regular season game pushed the French leaders' debate up 2 hours. And it was the self-professed hockey fanatic Mark Carney who was quickly body-checked.
Vous étiez le conseiller économique à Justin Trudeau. Est-ce que vous niez ça?
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre repeatedly trying to tie Carney to Justin Trudeau.
Les mêmes promesses électorales que Justin Trudeau répète depuis 10 ans.
Poilievre attacking Carney with a softer edge.
This wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister.
Compared to the parliamentary pit bull that's been Poilievre's signature for the past 20 years, a style that might not play well in Quebec.
It needs to be a balance. I mean, obviously they're going to attack, but they have to be careful when they're going to attack Mr. Carney.
Réussir avec Mr. Trump.
The first portion of the debate focused on Canada-U.S. relations, the central topic of the Liberal leader's campaign, but it was clear Carney had the weakest French on stage.
Le rebais et tous les Canadiens, y compris les Québécois et les Québécois, vont
not always using the right French word.
Monsieur Poilievre, vous voulez rendre...
Giving space for the NDP's Jagmeet Singh to attack Poilievre.
Les États-Unis, le Canada plus comme les États-Unis.
C'est pas vrai.
Vous voulez américaniser notre système.
C'est pas vrai.
Saying he's too much like Donald Trump, a potential Achilles heel for Poilievre, in a province he's not popular in. The possibility of a Poilievre government has sent Bloc Québécois voters flocking to the Liberals.
On utilise les contre-tariffs.
2 milliards pour l'automobile tout de suite en partant. Bing bang, 2 milliards.
Leading the leader of the Bloc to largely ignore Poilievre and attack Carney.
C'est quand même les mêmes partis, les mêmes ministres, le même caucus, la même idéologie, la même hostilité aux valeurs québécoises.
Saying a Liberal government would be hostile towards Quebec. Tonight's debate will likely be a dress rehearsal for the English language debate set for Thursday, Donna. Millions of Canadians will watch, including the roughly 1/3 of Canadians that multiple polls show haven't decided who they'll vote for.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Montreal, thanks. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson is with me. Mercedes, how do you think this debate went for these leaders?
Donna, all of the leaders performed relatively well tonight. The first time that Canadians have had the opportunity to see them head-to-head. Of particular interest, how Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre would perform when they were in this scenario. We've seen both of them out on the campaign trail, and in the case of Pierre Poilievre, we've seen him in the House of Commons for, well, decades now, but we've never seen them take each other on. And there was a lot of questions around how the two leaders would present themselves and what kind of points they would make. As far as election debates go, typically they only really influence an election if somebody really knocks it out of the park or does terribly. I don't think that either of those things happened tonight. What will be interesting is how the various performances change Canadians' perceptions. Let's take a look at how sort of each of the leaders presented themselves. Mark Carney came across as the man saying Canada is in crisis and I am the negotiator to handle this. That has been a tried and true line for him on his campaign, that people see him as someone who can solve the problem with Donald Trump. He was appealing to the concern about the existential crisis Canada could be in with Trump's threats about the 51st state, and he presented himself as the economist who knows how to navigate difficult times. He spoke well, and for someone who struggles in French, had a relatively good presentation. Pierre Poilievre was a much friendlier version of himself. This comes after a lot of polls in Quebec were saying that Quebecers weren't comfortable with some of his rhetoric and tone, which could be aggressive and name-calling. He looked much softer in this debate. He was smiling, much more reflective of what we saw from him earlier this week on Sunday when he was on a French talk show called Tout le monde en parle. On there, he did not attack his opponent. He focused more on presenting a more personable version of himself. Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, probably honestly his best performance so far of the campaign. He landed a few elbows and he appealed to Canadians to form a minority government, not a majority. Whether that complexity will be communicated to Canadians and change how they vote remains to be seen. And then there was, of course, Yves-François Blanchet, the BQ leader. This is really his comfort zone in his backyard. He was actually a little less aggressive than I expected him to be. He is trying to win voters back who are looking at going to the Liberals. For all of these party leaders, Quebec is critical to potentially winning an election, and they've all struggled with the exception of Mark Carney. But the Liberal support for him in Quebec could be soft. What happened tonight and what will happen in the English debate tomorrow may determine election fortunes, or it may be the last week on the trail. So far, Donna, I haven't seen anything that would swing this dramatically one way or the other.
Okay, Mercedes, thanks. The English debate is tomorrow, and because of that, Global National will be airing at different times in some parts of the country. We'll be on at 5:30 in Olive, Ontario. Then we'll have post-debate coverage at 7 on Global BC and Global Okanagan, 10:30 in Alberta, 11:30 in Saskatchewan, and you can also stream us on your website, our website, globalnews.ca. A little later, Eric Sorensen looks at where things stand for the Green Party after decades of pushing for political relevance in Canada. There are a couple of stark warnings today about the economic consequences of President Trump's trade war. America's top banker, the chair of the Federal Reserve, says the tariffs are unlike anything seen in modern history. And Jerome Powell said today they're putting the U.S. on the path to weaker growth, higher unemployment, and faster inflation. And the head of the Bank of Canada, which held its key interest rate at 2.75% today, says that uncertainty makes it impossible to forecast Canada's economic future. As Anne Gaviola explains.
Really, the situation is no clearer.
The governor of the Bank of Canada says trade wars and tariff threats are making it impossible for the central bank to issue its usual economic forecasts.
Faced with pervasive uncertainty, Governing Council will proceed carefully with particular attention to the risks.
Instead, it's considering two scenarios. One assumes most new tariffs will eventually be negotiated away. That process will be unpredictable, and businesses and households remain cautious. That could stall our GDP this year and drops inflation below the bank's 2% target. Scenario 2 is more grim, a long-lasting global trade war. Inflation spikes, and we're plunged into a deep recession.
We really don't have a clear picture of even the form these tariffs are going to take. What's going to remain in force? What's going to get rolled back?
The direct impact of Trump's tariffs have so far been limited. But uncertainty has already tanked business and consumer confidence. Both are pulling back on big purchases and major decisions. In the housing market, it's given many prospective buyers pause.
Our research shows it's certainly not the cost of borrowing that's keeping people on the sidelines. People on the sidelines because of uncertainty.
It's created a buyer's market for those who feel good about their job security.
Banks right now are pretty desperate for business. It's been a slow year for mortgages. There's a good chance that you might be able to get a good rate if you get in there and negotiate.
We'll have to wait until the first week of June for the central bank's next scheduled interest rate announcement. And the economist consensus is that unless there's a major change in U.S. protectionist, isolationist policy, the bank is likely to cut. Donna?
Okay, Anne Gaviola, thanks. Those who struggle to pay for food and a place to live are the ones squeezed the hardest when the economy tanks. With Election Day less than 2 weeks away, Heidi Petracek talked to those who see the realities of poverty every day and believe it isn't getting the attention it deserves.
Aveline Osmond always feels welcome here for a meal and a sense of community. But when it comes to the federal election, the 62-year-old feels left out.
I just feel like I'm in the middle there that nobody is accounting for, and it's not just me.
Like many Canadians, the benefits she gets haven't increased, and others she doesn't qualify for.
They're feeling the kind of crunch, the squeeze, right, of increasing costs generally, increasing rent costs.
We're not hearing food insecurity or hunger talked about specifically.
Food Banks Canada counted up 2 million visits to food banks in March of 2024, the most in Canadian history. It's called on all parties to commit to reducing food insecurity by 50% by 2030.
We can't have a strong Canada when we have a quarter of the population not knowing where their next meal is coming from.
People in the bottom income brackets don't even have wealth. All they own is debt.
StatsCan numbers show close to 4 million Canadians, almost 10%, live below the poverty line. One group focused on ending child poverty wants leaders to start talking about ways to help, like expanding access to the Canada Child Benefit.
It's not really reaching those who are living in deep poverty. We're talking about kids with disabilities, lone mothers, Indigenous children.
And with close to 17,000 Canadians sleeping in a shelter on an average night as of 2023.
It's just not enough to get folks away from living in tents.
The head of the nonprofit behind this new affordable housing project in Halifax says what's really needed is an unconditional guaranteed basic income.
That's going to help people meet their basic needs so they can lead a dignified and respectful life.
Look at the people who are falling through the cracks.
That's Aveline Osmond's message to candidates and what she'll be thinking about on voting day. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
Ontario is the latest province to try to remove interprovincial trade barriers. Premier Doug Ford introduced the Protect Ontario Through Free Trade Within Canada Act. The province says it unconditionally removes all exceptions to trading between the provinces. Ford also signed deals with the premiers of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, agreeing that any good, service, or registered worker that is recognized in one province is acceptable in the other. A recent Bank of Canada study found interprovincial trade barriers cause the same impact as a 21% tariff. There are some new numbers that reflect how many Canadians are turning their backs on the United States. Figures from U.S. Customs and Border Protection show just over 4.1 million travelers crossed the U.S. northern border last month, down nearly 900,000 from the year before. It's a 17% decline, is one of the worst year-over-year drops recorded outside of the COVID-19 pandemic. President Trump has met with Japanese trade officials at the White House. It's one of the first face-to-face negotiations to take place since the introduction of his sweeping tariffs. Japan declared a national crisis earlier this month over the potential hit to its trade. Although a pause on some tariffs was welcome, Japan's chief trade negotiator has said he is looking to build a relationship of trust during his two-day visit to Washington.
No state will be impacted more than the state of California as it relates to the unilateral authority that's being asserted by the Trump administration to impose the largest tax increase in modern American history.
That is California's governor. He is suing President Trump over his sweeping tariffs. Gavin Newsom filed a lawsuit today asking the levies be blocked, arguing Trump's use of emergency powers is unlawful and requires approval from Congress. California, the world's fifth largest economy, stands to lose billions to tariffs, and this is the first U.S. state to challenge Trump's policies. Toronto police are searching for two suspects after a deadly shooting. Multiple gunshots were heard shortly after 11 last night in Toronto's Riverdale neighborhood. One man died at the scene, another died later in hospital. Police don't believe it was a random attack. Witnesses saw two suspects running toward a nearby park. Police are working to identify the victims. And police are asking for the public's help in finding a suspect they believe is responsible for a hit and run at Toronto's Metropolitan University. 23-year-old Ryan Petrov has been identified as the person involved in a targeted attack on an individual, according to police. Yesterday afternoon, police described Petrov as dangerous and say he should not be approached. Two people were taken to hospital. All are expected to recover. A key ruling from the UK's highest court. Coming up, its unanimous decision on the definition of a woman. Britain's highest court has delivered a landmark ruling on the legal definition of a woman. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled the terms woman and sex in the UK Equality Act refer to a biological woman. It's a big victory for a campaign group in Scotland that has long argued biological sex is immutable. Redmond Shannon reports on the ruling and the reaction.
Some of the women who took this case to court could barely believe it.
How are you feeling? Absolutely jubilant.
The unanimous ruling of 5 British Supreme Court judges ends a dispute between a women's rights group and the Scottish government. In 2018, it passed a law allowing trans women who hold a gender recognition certificate to be regarded as women when it comes to gender quotas in public organisations. Opponents argued it would allow trans women access to female spaces like bathrooms and prisons.
The judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women.
The ruling does not deny trans women the right to identify as female, and the judge said the law still protects them from being harassed or discriminated against because they are trans.
But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not.
A nod to the culture war lightning rod that gender has become. Legal experts say the ruling does add clarity, but disappointed trans groups say it remains to be seen how the law is applied in different scenarios.
As I've spoken to lawyers and other people, it seems to be contradictory. It's not clear what it actually means in effect.
After the court's ruling, Scotland's First Minister says his government will look at its implications while trying to balance the rights of all. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In the U.S., the Trump administration is suing the state of Maine for allowing transgender athletes to participate in girls' and women's school sports. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi accused the state of failing to protect women and girls by not complying with Trump's executive order to rescind all federal funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities. Maine's governor says the matter is about state rights and defending the rule of law against a federal government bent on imposing its will. It's not easy being green. Ahead, what's the future for Canada's Green Party? It's been just over 40 years since Canada's Green Party was founded, and over those years, its core values of nonviolence, social justice, and ecological thinking have received national attention, as has longtime leader Elizabeth May. But it never really broke through in terms of elected MPs, and now being excluded from this federal election's leadership debates is a significant blow. Eric Sorensen looks at where the party goes from here.
Okay.
Keeping the Green Party in the game is the battle Elizabeth May has been waging since entering federal politics.
I stand before you with many more scars.
If elected to power, Greens would ban CFCs and garbage incinerators.
Greens have been fighting for the environment and political relevance in Canada for decades. It wasn't until May won the federal leadership in 2006 and got into the 2008 debate that the Green Party started to gain widespread notice.
You just sweep it across the table, don't you?
She won the Green Party's first federal seat ever in 2011, but the party is still small and struggles to stay in the public eye. The loss of its spot on the debate stage is a heavy blow.
Absolutely. The highest vote count we get is in the elections when we're on the stage in the debates.
The Greens were already struggling, unable to effectively counter the loss of public support for the carbon tax. Then Canadian voters turned to Donald Trump's high-stakes threats to Canada's economy and sovereignty.
Voting for a third party, a party that has no chance to win, might not be as easy to do now for some people as it was, say, in 2019 or 2021, when the stakes were not seemingly as high.
This election is closer to a two-party contest than any Canada has seen in decades, and not being on the debate stage just adds to the pressure the Green Party feels that it's being squeezed out. Pedno, a former journalist and human rights advocate, is still trying to get into the English debate Thursday and not giving up on the party's fight across the country.
One thing is clear, we will keep campaigning. We will keep fighting for a greener, fairer future for Canadians.
One thing the Green Party has going for it, it's accustomed to fighting from behind. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
League of their own next, how the Northern Super League could be reshaping Canadian women's soccer. Professional women's sports in Canada are finally getting the attention and respect they deserve. There's hockey. The PWHL's Canadian franchises lead the league in attendance. Basketball, Toronto's getting a WNBA team next year. And tonight, as Neetu Garcha reports, some of Canada's best soccer players are kicking off the Northern Super League's first season.
Canada has long been home to world-class soccer talent, but for women, the dream of playing professionally often meant leaving home. Until now, Canada's first ever women's professional soccer league is here to change the game.
I live in Toronto. I know.
The Northern Super League is set to reshape the landscape of women's sport in this country.
It's like a wedding. You're spending the whole year preparing and like the longest preseason that probably most of us have ever had. And the moment is finally here, so now it's important to, I've been told, enjoy the process of it.
It's a dream made possible by the vision of the league's founder, Diana Matheson.
We built 6 new teams from scratch. And all these players have essentially made the decision to leave existing clubs, existing leagues, where they know the playing quality, they know their teammates, they know the coaches, and they came to this brand new league because they believed in what we're building.
This creates a different future for a huge group of Canadians, you know, whether that's on the technical side, the medical side, the media side.
It offers players the opportunity to stay in Canada with a minimum salary of $50,000. Matheson believes the NSL's unique approach, built by women for women, will set it apart.
A lot of the professional soccer leagues around the world were built by men's soccer investment. We have the 3rd largest player pool in the world when it comes to girls and women that play soccer.
The Vancouver Rise and Calgary Wild kick off the inaugural game Wednesday in Vancouver, a match marking a new era for Canadian sport and a chance to build a lasting legacy for women's soccer. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
And that's Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada showcases Thunder Bay, Ontario, Richmond, BC, and Albert Memorial Bridge in Regina. Keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.